with shrapnel. That's Crystal Burgers with onions, and a box of fuses, French fries, and a bowl of mud, some chili. But Rodney, I didn't know that you had covered. And Buddy Martin's on here, GatorbackMedia.com, legendary, one of the original skywriters in the SEC. And I love talking about these great games from the past. And also several people, and I'm included, Rodney, I wish we could get your picture up here when you're on because, hell, you're a good-looking guy. We see you on TV all the time, WVUA TV 23, Tider Insider TV Tuesday nights at 6:30 with you and Gary Harris. But love having you on here. But, Rodney, I got to say, I did not know you were a beat writer. Who were you writing for?
No. I worked at a TV station in Jackson, and actually I covered. And I'm sure Buddy will remember this game. It might have been the same year. Can't remember. Rocky Felker's first year. I'm pretty sure it was Florida. Kerwin Bell brought Florida to Scott Field, and Mississippi State pulled off an upset. I don't remember if that was the same year or not, but I remember Mississippi State pulled off an upset.
Yeah. Now, good evening to you. How you doing, Rodney?
Well.
Nice talking to you, and
You
Rob
too.
and Brendan. Yeah,
Morning.
I was living in New York at the time, so I didn't really cover that game, but I do remember it. Yeah. And Mississippi State was a tough out a lot of times those days with Florida, you know.
Yeah.
And and even Spurrier had his moments, but yeah. So I'm glad I got you on here, Rodney, because I want to clear up some history while I'm at it. If I may, Rob, just jump in.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about Keith Dunham's book,
Yes.
The Missing Ring. Okay. And I know you know that story, Rodney, and I've forgotten the year because all the years run together after that.
66.
66 was the same year that Utah won the national championship, beat Kentucky in basketball, the same year that Steve Spurrier won the Heisman Trophy, and I thought it was. But the big deal is that Alabama had one of its greatest teams and did not get the national championship because the polls decided that then, and most of the polls were run by people from up north and out west and east, and so somebody made a value judgment apparently that that the team that was racist shouldn't be a national champion, and so Brian got screwed out of the ring. But I think it's an interesting concept because I was thinking back about this, guys, that looking at Florida's history, there were a couple of missing rings from Florida for different reasons too. So, you got to ask the question, is it right for somebody to say, well, you don't deserve to win a national championship any more than you do to say you shouldn't win the Heisman Trophy? I get O.J. Simpson, but Bush should never have lost his. Anyway, it's moral judgments, Rob, that come into play like that. I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, I'm not either. Rodney and Yancey Porter is going to join us here now, Rebel Yell Hotline over in Oxford. I got to say, I want to get Keith Donovan on this show in a big way, Rodney, because he's the historian of ESPN college football now. But his voice, it's kind of, when you watch him on these documentaries, y'all are all old enough to remember. Y'all remember an actor who was a great voice, Hal Holbrook?
I remember the name.
Yeah, famous actor. Yeah.
Incredible voice. He played Mark Twain. You probably saw Rodney. He narrated the Lewis and Clark Trail movies and narratives on National Geographic. Keith Donovan has a way of telling stories that makes you hang on every word. And and he was right though. That the South has never let go of what happened when Alabama went to the Rose Bowl and won that game. It wasn't just a victory for Alabama, it was for all of the South. And the South, like a pit bull putting its teeth into the hide of an animal, they've never let go. And that's why it's so personal. Don't you agree, Rodney? In the South, and Yancey, come in here in a second, but it's so personal with us in the South, our teams, especially college football.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's obviously, what makes certainly the root of it could be that what you're referring to. And, I actually mentioned that in my book about what that win meant for the South,
Yeah.
There's a lot of, you talk about that 1966 team, Alabama had won it in 64 and 65. That would have been a three-peat, They went 11-0. And, they felt like they got screwed out of that national championship. Obviously, Michigan State and Notre Dame had tied in their game that year, and they were kind of co-champions, I think, as I recall, depending on the poll.
That's correct.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah. So but I'll tell you, just kind of moving on to another controversial. I know you guys remember this. It's not. I guess you could say it's the SEC now. Certainly wasn't then, but when Texas and Arkansas played in 1969.
Yeah.
If you remember, Richard Nixon, who was the president, declared that the winner of the game would be the national champion. And Joe Paterno, he wasn't too happy about that. He had an undefeated team at Penn State, if you remember. And he kind of had a great quote. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I guess it's okay to tell this. But he was asked, Joe Paterno was asked how he felt about, being kind of what he felt like screwed out of the national championship, and that the president of the United States would actually insert himself in a position to make that declaration that the winner would be the national champion. And he said, they asked him, what would you say to Richard Nixon if you had a chance? And he said, I would tell him the same thing that the little 80-year-old woman told the priest when she went to confession, or not the 80-year-old, the lady who went to the priest to talk to him about getting on birth control. And that is, when he advised her not to, she said, play the game, make the rules, right? So, so I thought that was a classic quote from Joe Paterno.
Yeah, and Yancey Porter jumping here, Rebel Yell Hotline. Catch it Monday nights, 6 p.m., Sports 56 WHBQ in Super Talk, Mississippi. And Yancey, I figured you got caught in a meeting or something like that, but we're talking a little college football, little history and all like that. We had a lot of heavy dose of basketball in the first part of the show, but jump in this conversation and talk college football with us. If I have to twist your arm, I will.
Well, we're going back to the 1960s, so that was before my time, but obviously that was a good decade for the Rebels, the 50s and the 60s. With Johnny Bald, it was a shame that Ole Miss and Alabama's, listening to the Alabama teams, did not play but a couple times during that era. So that I think that would be one thing that jumps out to me. Rodney, I don't know about you.
Rodney? Hopefully we didn't lose Rodney. Okay, yeah. Rodney, are you still with us? We may have lost him.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yancey was just asking you a question. I just didn't know if you heard it.
Yeah, I lost you for a second. What was the question?
Yeah, you were going back to the 60s and talking about the Alabama teams and things of that nature. And I know that Archie Manning in the infamous game there where they had, yardage, but during the Vault and Bear days, Ole Miss and Alabama didn't face each other but a couple times for about a 25-year period. I just thought it was a shame that the two powerhouse programs out of the SEC in that era did not face each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. And there was I watched that game actually, 33-32. And I've talked to Scott Hunter about that 69 game a lot. And he's told me this more than once. He said, the crazy thing is, he said Legion Field held maybe 70,000 at the time. And he said, I've had 250,000 people tell me they were there.
Yeah.
But no, that was, and if you remember the next year, it was a hyped up game, the rematch, and Scott Hunter was hurt. And Ole Miss intercepted on the first possession, and it was a blowout. I think it was like 48-23 or something like that. That was one of the all-time great, even though it wasn't a great Alabama team, that was one of the all-time great
Buddy
games.
Martin, I remember as a kid watching that at LV and Mary Sharp's house in East Memphis off of Briarview as a kid on a Saturday night. We all got together, had a cookout at their house, and watched that game on the color TV. And we were all in the den, on the floor, and hanging on. And I think LV went to Alabama and Mary went to Ole Miss. They were friends of our family. And God, it was wild. I mean, their marriage survived it, but it was a hell of a night. Buddy Martin, you remember these great games.
Well,
And
you they did just show you said watch the color TV. I mean, not many people
say that.
But people
Hey,
think
buddy.
it's always been color. Yeah.
Buddy, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Darren, how involved is Florida right now in spring practice? Where are they right now?
Well, there's a little bit of a drop off because they had spring break. They're really early on their first couple of days. And,
well, what is quarterback? What does the quarterback situation look like right now?
Well, they got their quarterback from last year. He's back, but the young guy coming in, I'm in love with. I just think there's some superb player. Just what little I made in my declaration already on Lagway said, look, people said you can't make a judgment, but you just watched him on video and he's in practice and you haven't even talked to him. I said, the hell I can't. I said, look, in romance, we believe in love at first sight, don't we? I've seen enough quarterbacks in Florida to kind of know what I like. I like the way he walks on the field. I like the way he looks in his uniform. I like the way he throws the ball. I like his composure. He looks like a quarterback and a championship quarterback. And I'll make that statement now. This guy is something really, really, really special. And I look forward to it. Now, no, they got the guy they need there back. He obviously is their QB, and but Lagway will play in every game. So it's early on now, too early to call. I've already called it. You're the quarterback of the future. If they can get past this brutal year, what some are calling the hardest schedule in college football history, I don't know if I go that far, but it's a tough one. And there's no let up, especially the back half, and they end up the season with Ole Miss there. So, just let me jump in real fast. Thanks for the question. Robin, you mentioned the color TV. Context for old guys is important because people, like I used to joke, people think that all the sports started in '89 with the ESPN. And that's the year they started. And there was some history prior to that. And somebody mentioned, I think Rodney mentioned, Texas, Arkansas, those were the heydays, man, of college football. Who knew they would become SEC teams one day? But, those were great games. Yeah. I became a bit of a Texas fan back in those days, and later actually got a chance to go out to Austin a couple of times and to cover some games and meet some people. And I loved Texas, but they don't cross my radar very often. And now finally we get Texas. So, Rob, you and I are doing a show Friday on this.
Yeah.
And I've got a piece as soon as Brendan gets it up on the culture, the cowboy culture taking over the Southern gentlemen in the SEC. How will that go? Because as you said, and you're quoted in this piece, Rob, is that they'll have a big billboard in Dallas that says, or Austin that says, Texas welcomes the SEC. Not the other way around, So.
He's telling the truth.
Well, Rodney, think about that episode of the Beverly Hillbillies when Uncle Jed was running for mayor of Beverly Hills and Jethro had the plane flying around with the big banner. It said in all caps, Jethro Bodine says in the bottom right-hand corner, vote Jed Clampett. Rodney and Yancey and Buddy and Brendan, this is absolutely awesome having all y'all on here together. Every time Buddy comes on here, it's so cool because his connection and his memory and his mental acumen are off the charts. And, Yancey, you referenced it a minute ago, the 50s and the 60s. My dad is a kid. He's listening right now. Grandpa, by the way, it is Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. He always says, put that date and the day of the show because sometimes I forget what day it is. But anyway.
Oh, don't we all?
Yeah. And Yancey, you referenced that. As a kid, Dad used to sneak into Crump Stadium in Memphis. They would have double headers. Ole Miss would play, say, Memphis maybe, or Tennessee would play Mississippi State. But as a kid, he would sneak into Crump Stadium and always thought he was going to Ole Miss. And then he became an architect and wanted to go. And it was either LSU or Auburn. He ended up at Auburn. But, man, Yancey, your recollection of history, like Rodney's and Brendan's and Buddy's, is off the charts. And here it is, Ole Miss right now had their best season numbers-wise, 11 wins, regular season, in school history. talk about that enthusiasm in Oxford right now. And by the way, we have the Vitamin Shop, Oxford and Olive Branch. Justin Ross will be on with us a few minutes tomorrow to talk about it out at the Regalia in Oxford. Check them out. Open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m., 8 p.m., and Sundays, 10:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. You won't get the blank stare when you go in there. They know what they're talking about. Supplements, probiotics, pre-workout, active workout, and post-workout. The Vitamin Shop, Oxford and Olive Branch, Mississippi. But Yancey, let's talk about the Rebels, and then I want to go back to Rodney, and we'll bounce it around a few more minutes.
Yeah, spring practice opened up they've had 3 practices to date before spring break. Today is the first day the media will have a chance to view spring practice, and that's it. We get one day. They kind of switched things up this year. They're totally shutting down access for media and fans this year, unless you kind of know the direction that they are looking at for this year's team. But it's going to be a big spring. You've got 37 new players on the team. That's when you do 85 minus 37, that's a lot of new players. So anytime in the Lane Kiffin era, it's going to be a lot of turnover. But they return just about their 2 deep all across the field. So this is the most experience they brought back in the Kiffin era right now. They've got obviously the quarterback. The big question mark is who's going to fill Quinshon Judkins' shoes. As everybody knows, he transferred to Ohio State. They've got Riscano, a freshman running back from Texas that they're really high on. And I think that's going to be a big storyline this spring is how does he develop? Obviously they got Benton returning for Ole Miss, the 1-2 punch there that last year. And so they got to get that 2 punch, right? They got the 1, now they need the 2. And then when you look at the offensive line, that was what really kind of cost them during that Georgia game last year when they had some injuries leading up to the game, and then they lost another 2 starting offensive linemen, and Ole Miss really got exposed that they didn't have the depth on the offensive line. So they bring back 4 out of their 5 starters, but they added 4 starters from other schools, including 2 from Washington, which is I'm still a little curious why he didn't bring them over there to Alabama, but two starters there at Washington that started for 2 or 3 years for them off the top offensive line unit in Washington. So there's a lot of optimism that problem is going to be solved, but you never know until you get on the field. So there'll be a lot of eyes on that offensive line. And then defensively, they lose some cornerbacks and, replacing those guys, one that Rodney's familiar with there that comes over from Alabama. And then on the defensive line, they added, 3 all-SEC players in the portal there on that defensive line and returned the majority of their defensive line. So there's a lot of optimism. They're going to be really strong in that front 7.
Well, Rodney, Yancey points out the numbers. Let's do the same thing with Alabama. I love this conversation because you just cannot talk enough about college football. And you can catch, of course, Yancey Monday nights, 6 p.m., Sports 56, WHBQ Memphis, and Super Talk Mississippi, the Rebel Yell Hotline, Chuck Rounsville, the Ole Miss Spirit, Harry Harrison, Gary Darby, Gordon Ford when he's on there, but unbelievable content. It's must listen to content every week. Rodney, you do a great show, Tider Insider TV, Tuesday nights at 6:30. Let's talk a little about both sides real quick, and then Buddy will jump back in.
Yeah, you talking about Alabama's spring practice?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like what Buddy said about Florida. They had 3 practices before spring break last week. And, I thought everything went extremely well, all the feedback we got. And again, now we're limited as well, too. We can't talk to coaches now. We do get those opportunities. And then which you didn't have under Saban. And,
yeah.
But we did get a 30-minute viewing period on one of the practices. I thought it was really high tempo. I thought they got in a ton of reps. I think that's really how his practices are designed. So I thought from all the feedback I've gotten, everyone I've spoken to that had opportunities to observe all 3 practices, I thought it went really, really well for the first week. But, now today, actually, Tuesday, they restart. They've got 12 practices left. So we'll see. But, there's obviously some who are still questioning the quarterback situation. Milroe's obviously got a lot to learn, but all the other quarterbacks do as well. And he's got the experience, but they've got a really great room of quarterbacks. They've got to find, and Yancey made this comment about he wondered why Alabama didn't take those Washington offensive linemen that, that's a great point. I mean, I wondered the same thing, because you're probably going to certainly look in the portal maybe for an offensive tackle, in the spring when it opens in April. So we'll see there. But their wide receiver room, I think it has a chance to be really, really good. There's a true freshman, remember this name, Caleb Odom, who actually Ole Miss recruited extremely hard. There was a time when people thought he might go there. He's about 6'5". He's 210 pounds. He was going to play kind of that Amari Niblack role as that H-back, but tight end type guy. But he's just so athletic. He's so good. That they really like him as a wide receiver. He had a big first week. He was kind of the rave of the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, Kane Womack now here. Obviously, he's got Ole Miss ties as well with his dad. But, I think they should be really strong up front. That group looks great on the hoof. They have a lot of guys to work with up front. Obviously, you got to replace Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell on the outside, but they've got, I think I counted it, Rob. I think they have 7 guys that play outside that were 5-star players coming out of high school. So wow. They got a lot of talent. Yancey mentioned Trey Amos, going to be a great player at Ole Miss. That was a big loss for Alabama at corner. Thought he could have been a great, great player for this team. But Damani Jackson's transferred in from USC. Jaleel Hurley's a returning guy that's been here, and then they signed 3 5-star corners in this last class. So all 5 of those guys were 5 stars coming out of high school. Keon Sabb transfers in from Michigan. He'll kind of take the place of Caleb Downs. So yeah, they did have some losses, but they've kind of got some guys that have the talent to be really good too.
Yeah, buddy, jump in here.
My head's still spinning. I'm still trying to figure out whether they have divisions anymore in the SEC. That's a subject that comes up a lot. We got 2 powerhouse programs coming aboard this fall, and we have a lot to learn about this. We got new names, new players. We used to be able to know every roster, every team. We don't even know the coaching staffs, but it's changing, hopefully for the better. It's funny, we had a conversation about Ole Miss, and either Lane Kiffin or Jackson Dart's name came up. There are some people think Jackson Dart might be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league. I don't know. And we know Lane Kiffin is just sitting and waiting in the bushes, and he'll probably spring on us and come to Dallas and SEC Media Days. But let me just say this about Ole Miss. Again, context for old guys, from old guys. We talked about Arkansas, Texas being the great era of college football. Ole Miss was a dominant team. People forget Johnny Vaught won 6 SEC titles. 6.
Yep. He
never gets mentioned among the greats. And by the way, did this guy Nick Saban, is he still in the league? I don't know if he is or not. But anyway, you got guys like that. Ole Miss has had rich football history, and now they're relevant in a big way. And I think it's going to be a fascinating year to see what happens in the West. So much turnover. So yeah, Ole Miss is a terrific program. Good to see them back again, and it's going to make the SEC better. But remember, just so you remember, if you're going out to Dallas or Austin and you want to ask for an Arnold Palmer, around there and up in Oklahoma, the drink is not an Arnold Palmer. You know what that is? Not like it's a Roy Rogers. Roy Rogers drink. That's what it's called. Roy Rogers up in Oklahoma. So, yeah, times have changed. I'm hoping for the better. I just got to figure out how many playoff teams you're going to have eventually. 12, then 14, now 16. So, yeah, let's bring it on. We'll figure it out, I guess, day by day. And the wonderful game of college football. It will not be unscathed, but the new version of it, when the market settles in, and I told you this, Rob, a year ago, it's going to take a minute. When the market settles in a couple of years, we understand you're paying $1.2 million or whatever you're paying for a quarterback. By the way, didn't Justin Dart get a deal, an NIL deal with an airline? Private jets, I believe he did.
Yeah,
so
Nicholas Harris, a local. It's basically where private planes wherever you charter. I say they're local, but they've kind of spread all throughout the Deep South now. So yeah, he did.
Yeah, so times are changing, but when it all settles in, I'm hopeful the great game of college football will be what we hoped it will be. Maybe not the same, and that's okay. I just hope the change is better. I, as one who campaigned for a national playoff, and I campaigned 30 years ago, Rob, you know this, that they're going to condense it down to a super league with 16 teams, with 65 teams, whatever, and let them play it down. It's happening that before our very eyes. I hope I don't live to regret my dreams and hopes.
Well, I thought it was interesting, speaking of the playoffs, where the new deal that was cut that came out yesterday that they can renegotiate after the 16th season if there's any more conference realignment or the playoffs format change. So they are leaving that window open, speaking of 16, to go. We all know it's going to go to 16 teams. I mean, it's going to happen. And so it looks like after the 26th season is when they're leaving that window open to go ahead and move it to 16 teams. So we're only going to look at about a 3-year run at this 12-team format. And I thought that was very interesting yesterday when that news came out.
Go back and look at the history of that, Rob. Look at the history of the NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How many did it used to be in 16, 32, 32, whatever. It's going to happen in football. Yeah. There won't be that many, but they're going to definitely have a bigger. It'll be, you'll say, well, take the top 25 or whatever. It's going to grow, and we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And listen, unbelievable conversation. Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, Rodney Orr, Tighter Insider. He's also got a great new book that'll resonate with you. Read it, Bigger Than Bama. I'm reading it right now. Buddy Martin's show every weeknight, 9 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube. Brendan Martin, our executive producer, and everybody. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Don't ever doubt for 1 second. We live in the greatest country in the world. Just look around you. You're surrounded by the greatest people. We're all blessed. I love having Yancey and Rodney and Buddy on this show and Brendan, because you get it. Have a blessed day. You know, I believe in saying that. And every time I'm on here, I feel blessed because we have the best guests and sponsors and viewers on the planet. SEC, it is family. Ain't nothing like it anywhere. Got a great show in store for you tomorrow. But thanks, everybody, for participating in this show. We cannot do it without you. We're here to serve. So thank you. And as we say in the South, y'all have a good one.
Thank you, Rob.
We'll see y'all tomorrow.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shopp's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought-after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk Sporty Tunes.